If you've experienced something unbelievably weird and unexplainable that left you feeling isolated and afraid, the Paranormal PTSD Recovery Podcast is for you. Each week, we go from haunting to healing by focusing on one of our three core focal points: personal stories, healing tips, and understanding the unknown. We help you to know that you're not crazy, you're not alone, and you can heal. Now, here's your hostess, Laura Giles. What's it like to grow up being harassed by entities your whole life? Today, I'm talking to Stephen Shaw, co author of Who They Are and What They're Up To, who actually live this. There are menacing entities and helpful ones. We talked about abductions, abductions within families, paranormal PTSD, and even positive encounters with spirit. And whether or not you believe in that, the traumatizing impact is real. So let's talk to Stephen Shaw and hear what it's like. Welcome, Stephen.
Hello, Laura. Good afternoon.
So we've chatted about a year ago. What have you guys been up to since then?
Well, actually, we just got back from Bishop, California, which is about a 5.5 mile hour drive from where we are. That's in the lower eastern Sierras, helping a friend of ours out who's a rock climber, taking care of her cat
Mm.
for a week. So, good friend of ours. So
Yeah.
we got up there a little bit out of the heat, and so that was fun. Just house sitting and working, stuff like that.
Cool.
So yeah, but the past year we're continuing to do research, and I've been able to dig up some things that I had forgotten about that
Mm.
happened when I was younger, and we've added that to our Instagram page. And so yeah, we just been trying to research and delve in. We also went to Contact in the Desert again this year, as
Mhm.
far as like participants. So, yeah, that's what we've been doing, and just getting ready to do a second release of our book to make a couple of corrections, and that's pretty much what we've been up to.
Awesome. So can you tell us about your first encounter with the paranormal?
Sure, sure. When I was very, very young, my parents both grew up in wartime England as children, in a very heavily bombed area of Manchester and Oldham, which were, very next to London. They were the most heavily bombed. So they grew up knowing, fear and terror and that kind of stuff as children, also very no nonsense. So anyway, my mom's mother came from Germany, and they were, last name was Newman, and my mom was a Rowe, and I'm a Shaw because my dad was a Shaw. So anyway, I grew up from being a child knowing that we had this family spirit guide called O'Glegley that would show up from time to time and either help people out or check on people. And I'd heard from different people in the family, like my uncle Douglas, whose life was saved by O'Glegley, and other people too, that this was a real thing. And I always thought it was this spirit entity. So when I was 3 years of age, I remember being jumped on my chest and my stomach as a child. This it felt like a playful two-legged being that was just jumping on my chest and my stomach in the middle of the night. No, non-threatening, just it was there. And I heard about this family spirit guide, so I just thought that's what it was. So around about the age of 8 or 9, I remember sleeping in my top of my bunk bed, and my brother was in the bottom, and I was awakened by this weird sound that I hadn't heard before. And I knew it wasn't the dog, so it was the middle of the night, so I crept out of the bed and I was walking down the hallway. My heart was pounding, and my eyes were dilated, and I just remember being scared. I just knew this is something I did not want to see, or I was terrified. And then I just black out. And then next thing I know, a couple hours later, I'm back in my bed, just sleeping. And I wake up and I thought, well, how did I get back into my bed? But it was just like I was like tucked back in somehow. A few years later, when my brother turned about 6 years of age, he started sleeping in the closet in our room, and he slept there for about 2 years. And I asked Philip, I said, why are you sleeping in the closet? Well, he said, well, I'm scared of the little men that come at night. And I remembered about at his age that I woke up and I saw these little like garden gnome men that were entering our room from the hallway. And I looked at them for a few seconds and I saw about 4 or 5 of them. And then I just turned over because I was scared. And I tried to, like, I'm not seeing this. I'm not seeing this. And so when my brother told me about the little men and he was sleeping on the lower part of the bunk bed, I believed him. So I said, okay, Phil, I understand. But it's like, all right, what are we going to do about this? And just to remind people that this is, if you grow up in a family that has a spirit guide or a protector that's been with the family for 4 generations, and you just kind of accept it and you just don't tell your friends about it at school. They think you're living in a haunted house. They think that you're either making it up or that you're crazy. And so we didn't share this stuff about O'Glegley, the family spirit guide, with anybody but, people within the family. And that's when I heard from my uncle when I was about 16 about his encounter with O'Glegley in Sri Lanka, which was Ceylon at the time. He was in the Royal Air Force, and he was, British Royal Air Force, right? So he was like in his very early 20s. He was a pilot, and he was awakened again in the middle of the night, sleeping on a cot in one of these multi-man tents that they had back at that time. And this tall, skinny, dark entity woke him up in the middle of the night and said, "Douglas, you need to get out of here now. You're going to be attacked and probably killed." And so Douglas, knowing the thing about O'Glegley, he just got up, the entity just disappears, and he got out of the tent, and sure enough, within a minute or two, a raiding party came through with machetes and with guns and killed several of the officers. So as a result, my uncle became a very big believer in O'Glegley. In fact, his daughter's first car that he bought for her, the license plate was O'Glegley. I mean, that's just tells you. And this he became a very very rich man in in real estate and in escrow. And he was this very no nonsense guy. The Brits are no nonsense from that time period. So yeah, when they tell you something, you believe it. So, anyways, fast forwarding to when I was about 11, I saw my first UFO, and this was about 9:30 at night. And this one, I was just looking out the front door at the Fallbrook House in Woodland Hills, California, and I just saw this huge orange sphere that was going horizontally from south to north, kind of paused for a little bit, and then it continued on going north. And it was not an airplane, and it stopped for like a second, and then it continued going on. And I called Griffiths Park Observatory the next day, and they said, "Well, we didn't see anything because our telescopes aren't pointed in that direction." So this was the time period in the 70s and the early 80s when there were actually a fair number of UFO sightings, even at one in Tarzana um, Drive-In that was sighted by many people. So that was my first sighting, and I've had 4 others since then. The main thing with me is that for a large part of my life, especially, I've had sleep disturbance. When I am getting really very, very relaxed to go to sleep, sometimes I'd hear like a 3 knocks right behind my head, like it's coming right from the wall behind me. And that's very disturbing for anybody. But I've had that happen hundreds of times to me. Not a lot recently, but certainly, for a large part of my life, I had that happen. Now, when I was 18 years of age, we had an occurrence that happened that every member of the family experienced. And I think we talked about it last time. It started out with this is in January of 1979. My dad, who was a cabinet maker, and I was working with him as a cabinet maker, we had our shop at our house. So, anyways, at breakfast time, he said that, Stephen, my closet doors opened and closed on me during the night. And I just kind of just said, "Okay, Dad. All right. Well, you're probably dreaming or something like that." So I didn't really pay too much attention to it. He was serious, but I said, "Okay." And my dad, by the way, he was a bobby. He was a cop in England from 52 to 56. So, he's a guy who basically was, no nonsense guy. So, anyways, the next night, my dad came into my room after I'd given him this book by Paramahansa Yogananda called Metaphysical Meditations. The Dad, you should read some of this stuff. And about half an hour later, at 9:30, he came into my room and just has this puzzled look on his face. And he said, "Stephen, you got to hear this." I said, "What?" hearing a silver bell." I said, "Okay, you're hearing a silver bell." All right, so I went into the room, and I've been a lifelong musician, so I know what a silver bell sounds like. So yeah, there was a very clear ding ding of the silver bell that was being rung inside the 2 by 4 wall by the fireplace. So we got my sister. My sister was 13 at the time and didn't want to have anything to do. She thought all this stuff was weird anyway. She just turning her back on the whole old Glegley thing, right? So she said, "Well, where's that bell coming from?" And she said, "It's right inside the wall here." And so we looked up the chimney and banged on the wall and went on for a good 10, 15 minutes and then it just stopped. Now, the next morning, my mom and my brother were living at the house we were building up in Sonora, California, which is 350 miles away in the lower Sierras. And my mom said, "The strangest thing happened last night, Jeffrey, my dad." He said, "About 9 o'clock at night, I heard this bell ringing and I thought it was the phone. I picked up the phone and there was this voice on the other end saying, 'I am the invisible Ambichi,' or something such as that. Have no idea what that means, right?" I talked to my brother after that. My brother being 6 years younger than me says, "Stephen, the phone didn't ring, but mom did pick up the phone. And she swears that there was a guy talking on the other end of the phone at the exact same time that we're hearing the silver bell." Okay. Now, the following night was when I was sleeping on the lower bunk of my bed in my bedroom, and I was awakened by a whizzing sound in the air. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And I just thought, well, maybe it was a fan going or something like that. I kind of looked down the hallway, little light on the kitchen, couldn't see anything, so I went back to bed, laying on my left side, and then the lower part of the bed from the base gets pushed 2 times gently. And I thought, well, maybe it's a little mini earthquake. Okay. And then try ignore it. And then it gets pushed again, harder. And then a third time, even harder. And at this point, I'm getting a little bit scared, a little bit aggravated. So, is somebody playing a trick on me? And then I get 3 taps on my mid deltoid on my right side. Tap, tap, tap. Just like an index finger, somebody tapping me. And so then I whizzed around and I said, "What?" And I could tell there's something there. I just can't quite see it, but there's something there that's looking at me. And then I black out. Told my dad about it. And so the next night I said, "I'm not sleeping in that room. Okay. I don't know what's going on, but I'm not sleeping in that room." So I decided to sleep in my work clothes, my cabinet making work clothes from the day before. And I slept on the couch in the living room. And about 5:30 in the morning, I woke up and laying on my back, and I looked at my piano, thinking about what music I was going to write or play that day, and listened to the little fountain in the other room. So I was awake. I was alert. I was thinking, well, it's dark, January. I'm not going to get up. I'm just going to try and go back to sleep. As I'm just laying there, from the front door, this entity, tall and skinny, about 6.5 feet tall, roughly, came walking, gliding towards me, which is about 25 feet distance, in about a second and a half to 2 seconds, filling the whole room with blue white light. I mean, not so much that you can't see, but intense blue white light. And it stopped by my right side. And as soon as it stopped by my right side, the whole right side of my body, you also bisected down the midline, whole right side went completely frozen numb. Not scary, but where I couldn't, my eye was open and I couldn't close my eye. Okay. I couldn't move my right arm, couldn't move my right leg. I was just stable, right? And it bent down to me, this entity, this blue white light entity, and it said, "Hi, Steve," in a whisper. I couldn't tell whether it's male or female, but that's what it said, not inside my head, but into my ear. It was external. And I'm thinking, "Oh, cool. I'm going to see O'Glegley that I've heard about since I was 3 years of age. I'm going to see the family spirit guide." The other half of me, the logical side, was saying, "Dude, you're paralyzed. You can't move." No, so there was a fear part of me and there was the excitement part of me. And they were kind of balanced. And that lasted for, I guess, maybe 5 or 10 seconds. And I kept on trying to look at his face, kept on saying, "I want to see your face." Couldn't quite see its face, but I could tell the size of it and the height of it and the shape. And then it basically left the same way it came in. And then I black out. So I told my dad at breakfast a couple hours later, so I don't know what happened in between. And the funny thing was is that 6 hours later, it's 11:30 in the morning, and we're both getting hungry for lunch. So I said, "I'll go down to Jack in the Box, to go and get some food first, right?" So I pulled the coins out in my right-hand side pocket from no, from the encounter, right? I hadn't, like, reached in my pocket that day. Pulled out the coins that I had there, and all the coins were magnetic. Okay, these are standard American coins. I could pick up the coins, and so could my dad, with each other. Okay, doesn't matter face, tip, whatever. It's supposed to be not be able to be magnetized American coins, right? Otherwise, you couldn't get through the TSA and things like that. So, anyway, so 6 hours after it happened, we just thought, what the hell is going on? And then the final night was, which I have no recollection of all, but my dad does. He saw this intense blue white wall of light enveloping my bedroom door. And again, in the middle of the night, and he said, "Okay, I'm going to get up and see what's going on. This is getting ridiculous." So he's getting out of bed, and then a voice inside his head said, "Jeffrey, just go back to sleep. Nothing to see here. Everything's fine." And that's exactly what he did. He went back to sleep, told me about it in the morning, and I have no recollection of that at all. I mean, I could have been taken when the coins were magnetized. I definitely probably was taken when that blue white entity enveloped my room. When my dad saw it, but I wasn't aware or whatever. So I honestly, I do not know how many times I have been taken or I've had a direct interaction. But when you have physical evidence and physical proof that's witnessed by more than one person, and then also like by five people having similar things happen at the same time, you know that something is going on. Okay. And then when my brother saw the tall gray in his room in 1982 and then blacked out, then we knew then we started to put the pieces of the puzzle together that, okay, this is not a spirit guide. This is actually a gray that's pretending to be a spirit guide that has some reason, has some interest and some need, some necessity. I always call it boils down to necessity. There's a reason why they're interested in my family bloodline or the Rowe family bloodline. Incidentally, all the women in the family have been automatic writers. Okay, where they communicate with the other side. I mean, they just have that ability. I've tried it myself. I don't like it because I feel invaded. I don't feel comfortable. I've done the Ouija board too with my sister. We could make it move without our hands even touching it. I mean, I know there's something there, and I think partly they might be interested in people that have a certain bloodline, but also maybe partly psychic. I think it's easier to communicate. So yeah, it's caused me a lot of over the years. It's caused me a lot of confusion and a lot of basically trauma. When you stop sleeping because you're afraid to go to sleep. I mean, that starts to wear on you. Uh, so
So Oglegly is a gray?
that's what we have come to find that Oglegli, which means basically it means my friend. We found the translation for Oglegli. Apparently in Tunisian, it means my friend. Okay, so we came across that from my uncle who did a lot of world traveling. But so Oglegli is a gray that has been interacting with the family that we know of for at least 4 generations, going back to Germany.
So why do you suppose he is helpful towards you, protective towards you?
Well, because I've had my life saved on a couple of occasions. He saved my uncle's life on one particular occasion in Ceylon. Told him to get out of there, otherwise he's going to be killed. So I think it's a symbiotic relationship. They
Yeah.
kind of need us. They need us for, let's say, maybe our sperm and our eggs and our blood, things such as that. And they're kind of like like Leslie says, it's like a farmer protecting his prize animal, prize cow. You don't want the prize animal to die. You still have to feed it and take care of it, and protect it because it gives you something back. So I think it's very much kind of the symbiote. From what I've been able to find, what we've been able to find, is it's a very symbiotic relationship. They're kind of like handlers, but you know what? Their blood, we think that the Greys may be either one of two things. They're pretty much their handlers are the Nordics. Okay, the Nordics basically are kind of like the handlers of the Greys. Now, Greys may be a composite race that has been turned into kind of a slave race or a servant race for the Nordics that are certainly less emotional than humans that have been modified genetically because the Nordics are definitely ahead of us. They're our cousins. We call them our cousins. So if you look at a gray really looks anatomically like a human. It walks the same way. It doesn't walk like a chimp at all. And also too, also the commonality of being able to be use telepathy. Okay, they telepathy is basically a simpler way of communication than speaking. Speaking and reading a language is much more difficult than using telepathy. In telepathy, you don't have to worry about whether you're speaking Swahili or French. Okay, it's basically because our mind thinks in pictures and concepts, and people have to realize that it's they don't have to learn 7,000 different languages. It's much more simple than that, but they also are very similar to us. That's why they have so much interest, and they live here. Okay, so that is what we have found in nuts and bolts of it, and in a way, it's kind of a little comforting in a way. They really don't want us to blow ourselves up. They don't want us to have nuclear war, and they've proven that they can disable our nuclear weapons. They've been proving that since the '60s. So I think that that there's like I say, a symbiotic relationship.
So, have you ever been able to successfully remember the stuff that's blacked out?
Oh, not yet. As far as like what happened in the blackouts,
Uh-huh.
no, no, I have not. We've tried a couple different hypnotherapists, and so far it's been like I can get hypnotized, but the only time I was really effectively hypnotized was on my 19th birthday at a Pat Collins Hip Hypnotist Club, and that I was on stage with 8 other people, and I was definitely hypnotized. And but since then, there's like this wall. I just can't get past that.
Yeah, that's common.
And it's just like no, no. You can go so far, but we won't let you like see what really happened.
Do you think you want to?
Boy, that is the $64,000 question. Part of me doesn't want to see sperm being taken from me, or blood being taken, or being on a spaceship with I kind of am curious, really curious about it, and would kind of like to get maybe closure. But a lot of me just says, just accept the fact that you know that especially when I was younger, they had a very strong interest in me, and my brother, and it seems like they have more of an interest in the men of the family.
Mm.
That's what I can tell. The women have been serving a different purpose. My mom was very psychic. I mean, she knew when her mother, her father, and her uncle Clifford all died in England, all at different times, and she was contacted by the spirit O'Glegley. We call him the spirit, right?
Mm.
And she picked me up from school when I was 9 years old, and she was completely just bawling. I said, "Mommy, what's wrong?" She said, "Well, my mother just died." I said, "Well, how do you know? Did you get a phone call?" Said, "No, no, no, no. I went into a trance. I went into automatic writing, which I knew what she did, and the automatic writing told me that your mother just died. She fell down some steps and she
Mhm.
broke her hip and she died." And a day later, we got the call from England that she had died. My dad believed it because he knew about the old Glegley stuff. So he said, "Oh God." So we were just waiting for the phone call, quite frankly. So, and she knew too when her father died and when Uncle Clifford died. And I've read other stuff in automatic writing that I wasn't supposed to. I found some of her notes and that things she was writing that there's no way she should have known things like that. So she was automatic writing, apparently, according to my sister, pretty much up until when she died. She still would automatic write about stuff, and it was that was kind of her gift, I guess. Um, but she was also kind of a very solitary, very quiet person, but also had very, very strong opinions. You know what I mean? Very strong opinions, but wouldn't say them. But when she would say them, it would be like the hand of God coming down. She was a scary person, my mom. Okay? She was scary. You can ask my wife about that.
So can you tell me what happened to your brother?
Oh, yeah. My brother, again, he was kind of taciturn about talking about things, but because I asked him about his younger life on several different occasions, and he said, I can't remember my younger life. I can't really remember elementary school. It's just like he had this big mental block, right? But when he became, an adult and he had a job, he was a draftsman and engineer, and he taught calculus for fun at college level for extra money. We talked to him. He told me about this series of events that happened to him at the house we were building in Sonora, California, when he was 16, which was around 1982. And the first night, he was awakened by these two very bright white lights that were outside of his window. And his window faced off towards the creek, which was a drop off about 30 or 40 feet. And everything behind it was this forest. There was no street there, no nothing. We were living in basically a forest. And he was looking at these bright white lights right outside of his window, and then he blacks out. Now, the next night, he's awakened again in the middle of the night by the sound of like scratching on the hardwood floor underneath him. He thought, well, it was one of the cats. So he rolled over to pet the cat, and instead of a cat like being playful with him, he was grabbed by the wrist by a hand. Okay, and then he blacks out, which you normally don't do that when your adrenaline kicks in 1/200th of a second and you're in like adrenal mode, and that's what happens. But no, he blacked out. Now, the final thing that happened was again he was awakened in the middle of the night, and he knew something was wrong. And he looked, he turned over in his bed, and he saw this tall gray, about 6.5 feet tall, and just standing in the doorway. And they looked at each other for a couple seconds, and then he just blacked out. Okay, so that was what happened there. And then later on, one of the houses that he built on the upper deck, there would be this orb, this orangish red orb that in the middle of the night would kind of go up and down his deck, going horizontally. And one night, about midnight, he decided, I'm going to like see what this is about, right? See if it's a hallucination or a firefly or something like that. So he went out on his deck, and sure enough, there was this like about maybe 2-inch diameter orb that was just hovering there. And he looked at it, and then it just rushed him, and it went right through his right shoulder and went right through his body. And the funny thing was, is that Leslie and I were visiting the house like 2 days later, the house that we were building with my dad. And my brother told us about that story. And he said, it went right through my shoulder, and I've got this really itchy spot over here. And so we looked and took off the shirt and looked, and had this orb shaped bruise, just 2 inches, like he said, was right there on his right back shoulder, the exit point. And that's when he told us the stories about. We asked him further about what happened when he was 16. And my brother, as you know, he ended up killing my mom and killing himself when he turned 51. Um, he was starting to fall apart emotionally at that point because my dad had just died before that. And so we had like a huge family loss in 2.5 months. I lost almost my whole family in 2.5 months, and it ended up where my brother just my mother was in a lot of pain. So I think it was, and also he started hearing things. He started hearing things that weren't there, and started seeing things that he put ring cameras inside the house and outside the house, and started like not sleeping and getting very paranoid about stuff. And then he just couldn't take it anymore, and he killed my mom and his cats first. He killed his cats first, then he killed my mom, then he killed himself.
Mm.
And partly is just because he was starting to have a lot of the stuff I've had throughout my entire life, and I think he just didn't know how to deal with it. Was hearing things crash in his room, and he thought that somebody was upstairs moving stuff around, and stuff was falling down through the wall. I've heard that my entire life. I've heard like closet doors being slammed in my room trying to go to sleep, or plate glass windows being broken, or the knocking behind my head. I've had that I've had that not a lot recently, but I've had that through most of my life, and
Do
I've
you
just
think
come.
do you think that whoever is responsible for that was menacing?
Well, I don't dismiss the fact that there's probably different levels of what's going on. I mean, as far as like you know, the Greys trying to get in contact with me, that's a different thing than some other entities too. I don't dismiss that fact that there's probably some malevolent entities that have been, messing with me because I messed with the Ouija board for a while and that kind of stuff. I might have invited some things in,
Mm,
but from the standpoint of we know that the this old ugly character is definitely not a demon. This is a Grey that's been masquerading and has helped people save people's lives. I've had my life saved on a couple different occasions, which I just can't explain.
mm,
I can tell you about those if you want. And
sure.
you know, it was 1992, April the 1st. Yeah, April Fool's Day, right? Right. So I was 31 years of age. I was at the beach with my ex-wife, and I decided to go body surfing, which was a stupid thing to do on a California beach in April because the water's really cold. But, my having been in the military, I figured I was still, in shape good enough to go out body surfing. Well, I wasn't, okay? And I wasn't wearing any wetsuit, just wearing my shorts, right? So I went out there with a couple other guys and we were body surfing, riding the waves back in, and I was getting kind of cold, and I saw that they started to go in, and I decided, oh, I'll stay a bit longer, whatever. And then my arms started to feel like, oh, I can't really move my arms anymore. And I'm about 100 feet out, okay? And I decided, well, I better start swimming in now, right? And then I'm swimming in, but stupid me, I was swimming against like maybe a riptide or something. So I was like swimming, doing a breaststroke, and I wasn't getting anywhere. And then I thought, well, maybe I should go that way. But then I thought, well, I got to get in. And then my arms, they became like lead. I've never had that happen to me before or since. My arms got so cold that I couldn't lift them. I could barely lift them. Okay. They were like, 5 times heavier than they normally are. And I said, oh, I'm going to die. I'm just going to die because I can't get in. So I saw this lifeguard that was at the far lifeguard tower right in front of me, but he was about 125 feet away, at least, okay? Because you have the beach and then you have where I was, right? And he's flirting with some girls, right? And I said, I got to get his attention, right? So I go, help. And didn't hear me because the waves were crashing, right? Then I go, help. And then I said, oh God, I got to just do everything I can do. So I yelled as hard as I could and got one arm up. And then he saw me. And then I just go down. And I went down so far, I was so far out because I couldn't even touch the bottom of the sand. I went down about 6 feet and I still wasn't touching the bottom of the sand. All right. So I was pretty far out. And I look up and I just say, holding my breath, I said, oh, I'm going to die. And I start to see the light. I start to see the light of the sun. It's almost like this comforted feeling came over me like, oh, this isn't going to be so bad. I'm going to die. A little young, but I'm going to die, right? And so I'm getting ready to take my breath, right? And then this arm from above, this is like 2 seconds after I catch this guy's attention, right? Maybe three at the most. Okay. He somehow got 125 feet, found me in crashing waves, and reached down and grabbed my arm and pulled me up just before I take my last breath. Okay. And then he gets me in the crawl position, said, just relax, sir. I've got you. Right. And so take me in. My ex-wife is just looking at me saying, you idiot, kind of just had like no compassion whatsoever. And, my arms are still like lead. I can barely move them. And I wanted to thank the guy. Gone. No one knows where he went. Really? Lifeguard? Where did he go? Just he was there and gone. When a person almost dies, when you're in life support, that kind of stuff, you don't leave the patient. Okay. You just don't. You don't leave your lifeguard station. You don't leave the patient. All right. So, anyways, no one knows where he went. He was there and then just disappeared. And I should have died that day. That was one of the times when I should have died. And I still say, you know what? I was saved. I was saved. There's no question I was saved. So
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss the show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you.
for what it's worth, these angels or these protectors or whatever you want to call them, they are there because I was apparently important enough to save. You
Yeah.
know,
Hmm.
apparently so. Apparently, still had a purpose. I was an acupuncturist. I mean, I was helping save people's lives. I guess I had some purpose still to do. But I
Now,
always remember that April Fool's Day, 1992, at Nicholas Canyon Beach.
so I think it's common when somebody has some weird stuff going on for them to want to know like what's going on, and you've done that by becoming a researcher with your wife.
Yes.
How has going into research changed your relationship with what's happening, or has it?
Well, first of all, it solidified our
Mhm,
some of our theories that we
mhm,
were toying around with, or like it gave us more of an insight into, for instance, like the Great Flood and what's the commonalities that a lot of different groups of people. Um, there's like 1,200 different flood myths, and they all have similar things. Like almost all of them have either a disembodied voice or somebody saying you got to either go to the highest ground or build an ark or go underground because there is a winter coming like you've never seen or a cataclysm coming. So there was foreknowledge. So once we learned that there was foreknowledge and forewarning, and different major religions around the world, they all have a common thing that the Hindus do, the Chinese, of course, we do in the Bible, Zoroastrian. Now we know that there was an influence, and that there was a higher level of technology at the time than most people realize. That we had to have a high level of astronomy and be able to see things coming ahead of time, being able to see like an asteroid is going to hit or a comet's going to hit. And that led us to find out that there was a comet impact around 12,850 years ago, either in the Lake Superior area or somewhere in Mexico, that left behind nanodiamonds, which are the trademark of a celestial impact. They only form in one way, nanodiamonds. So it led us to find that there was a great flood that had happened in a certain time period about 12,850 years ago, because of the Younger Dryas boundary and the Uccello horizon. So we found the physical evidence, and we had all the stories to go along with that. And we also found out too that human beings were a lot more advanced than we've been given credit for. So all these things like the O'Glegley character and the Nordics and all that, the ones that were able to, let's say, they're the ones, the haves and the have-nots were left on the surface. Okay, so you have the haves and the have-nots. Now the have-nots were really reduced to about 10,000 individuals at that time, which now, because we have advanced genetics and DNA and CRISPR, we can tell now that there was a genetic bottleneck. So the surface people of the time were reduced about 10,000 individuals, and all the 8 billion on the planet right now have been are basically come from that 10,000. So we know these facts, that we're reduced, that there was a comet that hit. We know that it hit about 12,850 years ago because of the nanodiamonds, and we know that there was forewarning. So all these things tell us that these are not interdimensionals that are coming from Alpha Centauri and all over the place and just happen to be passing by and say, "Hey, these are cool people. Maybe we should help them out." And also the cattle mutilations. What is the deal with that? Why are they stealing all the blood and the sex organs and the eyes? Okay, because there's a physical necessity. There is a reason for it.
that makes
Okay,
sense.
there's a need for it. So you got to look at what the facts tell you, because they say facts tell and stories sell. Well, stories, a lot of people are telling stories these days. What I'm more interested in is the facts. Okay, I'm facts are basically give the stories a credence. Okay,
Mhm.
so that's what we're trying to purvey in our book, is to purvey what is more likely, what is less likely, and what has happened to us that we can actually tell from a truthful standpoint. And that's what our goal has been, and that's what our research has shown us.
Well, what do you suppose the government has disclosed that UAPs are real now? So after
I
all this time of, debunk, 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 this is not real. Why do you think they're saying it now?
I think Leslie says that the best. She says it from the standpoint that they almost have no choice now. Everybody's got a camera on their hip. Almost everybody's got a cell phone, and the level of deniability from the 40s to the 50s to now is just they can't use the swamp gas stuff anymore, or it's a mass hysteria. They can't use the easy deniability because everybody's got a camera, and it's happening all over the world, and not everybody is nuts,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so yes,
Hmm.
so they can't use the easy plausible deniability anymore. So it's kind of like they have to reluctantly say yes, this is real. The 2017 Tic Tac and Go Fast and Gimbal videos that Elizondo released, they had to reluctantly say, yes, these are real. We don't know what they are, but they're real. They don't seem to be harmful. But then again, 6 months ago, with the Arrow report, they said, oh, the Pentagon says that UFOs are not real. We have no evidence to show they're real. Okay. But you know what? Because they're not, they're kind of lying, but they're not lying. UFOs or extraterrestrials, they're not really extraterrestrials. They're intraterrestrials. They're here. So they're playing with semantics. So
Mm.
they're kind of lying, but they're not lying. That's the way we interpret it.
Well, there must be some way to protect us from this because, they can control you, they can knock you out, and which seems to me that they have something to fear from us. So, how do you have any idea how we can take back our own control? So, not necessarily that we're going to wipe them out, but just to maintain our own sovereignty.
Mm. Well, obviously, they don't want to wipe us out. If anything, they want to either reintegrate with us or maybe infiltrate. There's certainly evidence to show that certain individuals like Chinese and Russian diplomats have been caught on hot mics saying that that they're already here, that they're living amongst us, that they walk amongst us, that and you'd be surprised how many of them that there are. So it's something that we think that partly maybe they're trying to change us from the inside out, making us maybe a little bit less. Haven't done a very good job of it yet, but they're trying to make us maybe a little bit less violent, maybe
Mm,
change some of our policies.
mm,
Leslie also says too that, and I agree with her here. Reluctantly, I agree that it's much easier to control a dictator than it is a democracy because
yes,
you only really have to, really influence like one versus
yes.
a whole cabinet, everything else. So your sense seems to be a trending towards authoritarianism and dictatorships in the world, which we talk about a little bit in the book. And so we think that there's, that we are still necessary for them. I think that because that people forget that we've had over 2,000 nuclear detonations since 1945. There's been over 2,000 nuclear detonations. There have been air detonations, there have been underwater detonations, and then subsurface detonations. We've done 2,000. And if you don't think that people that are living, our cousins that are living in vast cities under the earth, okay, aren't disturbed by nuclear detonations. In fact, they started showing up mid World War II as Foo Fighters, and they really are concerned about our destroying the planet and basically radiating them.
Mm,
And I think that they have a vested interest in our denuclearizing and are becoming less violent. And I think they're trying to reason why they haven't really revealed themselves, if you look at it, what it would do to, let's say, the religions of the world and the economies. And it's just one of these things like it's such a delicate subject. How do you introduce yourselves without without, causing, millions and millions upon of death, and maybe people releasing nuclear weapons anyway because
yeah,
they're fearful.
yeah,
We're such a fearful species. We're influenced by fear and anger and
yeah.
misinformation so easily that, and they're more advanced than we are. Okay, they probably do. Telepathy is just like a normal thing, right? So they're trying to influence us, but they look at us as barbaric. We're barbaric compared to them. So it's a difficult question. I think that they're trying to protect themselves, but also they want to also protect the planet. That's what we're seeing.
Well, I agree with you that the way forward has to be from a place of peace and calm because if you're triggered, if you're living in a space of fear, you are going to respond with anger and violence and destruction and all of that.
Yes.
So, Stephen, do you have this is the Paranormal PTSD podcast. So, Stephen, do you have a memory, whether it's PTSD or paranormal or not, that we can process and lessen the energy around it?
Well, I certainly would like to know what I saw when I was 9 years old walking down the hallway when I was literally terrified, and then I blacked out, then I ended up back in my bunk bed.
Okay.
I would like to know about that, what I
Okay.
actually saw.
Well, let's do it. So we'll be right back. Okay. Great. So how you doing?
Feel great.
Awesome. Oh,
I like the loop thing. It seems like it, like, connected both sides of my brain sounds, like
that's
more
awesome.
yeah.
So I wouldn't
It's
say that
right in the
it's
back, right in the back.
yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's easy to heal from a lifetime of terrifying events, but it's definitely possible. And there's hope for regaining health. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story because I think that we need to heal this stuff. It is real. And
Mhm.
one of the ways we do that is to tell our stories and to validate each other. And these stories are real. Yeah.
Yep. That's yeah, it's kind of the funny thing is that, there are a lot of people that we talk to that have never seen a UFO, and, I've only seen 5 in my lifetime, and Leslie's only seen 2, and she didn't see her first until, she was in her 40s, so it's one of these things that just doesn't happen. It's happening more frequently because people are more, I think, more aware, more attuned, but
They're looking.
yeah, they're looking more too,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and there's a lot more stuff on some that's faked, of course, but there are
Yeah.
some real things that are out there. I mean, that's one thing that the humans have. We seem to have this curiosity, but also this need to play jokes.
Yes.
Play jokes on people.
Yes.
Play jokes on cats, play jokes on dogs. It's like it's funny. We need to laugh, and that's I think what we need a lot more. We need to have more happiness in the world, quite frankly. We
Agreed.
need to have more kindness and more happiness and more, I think that if anything, I think that what we found part of our research is that when the cousins show up, and especially to children like the ones in Zimbabwe, they always have the same message: take care of the planet. You
Mhm.
know, you're not taking care of the planet; you're killing the planet. And I think I really, part of me says, geez, if we just were evolved enough to just accept them and we could work together, we could do so many great things. But I think we're still dealing with like a fear, anger,
Yeah.
just stupidity kind of thing that is happening, and we just have to open it up and listen to what our hearts and our heads are saying. Like in Tai Chi, you're supposed to feel with your head and think with your heart. And when you move, the slower you move, the actual better you think,
Hmm.
because you have, like, when you're reading a book, I mean, just in my personal opinion, what I see, part of our big problem is now we're putting the cart before the horse. We're having children get on computer screens and scramble their brain wave and their brain chemistry before they learn how to slow down their brain waves and their brain chemistry. Like reading a book makes you have to encode information differently. So it's like we don't run before we walk, or we don't walk before we crawl. It's like now, like little kids are being told to run before they even learn how to crawl.
Hmm.
And I think that it's just basically not doing us any good. I don't think we're I think we're progressing a little bit too quickly, and we're not ready for it. And certainly from my generation, there is no such thing as a cell phone and a smartphone,
Yeah.
right? So you can't talk to your parents about this kind of stuff because they have absolutely even less clue than I have. So it's like we're getting disconnected from our roots, and I think we really have to like see what is obvious and do it. You know,
I love
that's what
that.
I see.
Love that message. Thank you. My guest is Stephen Shaw. The book is Who Are They and What Are They Up To? The links
Who
in the
they
show
are
notes.
and what it's actually who they are and what they're up
Who they are and what they're up to. And the link is in the show notes. So
to.
get it for more detail on Stephen and Leslie's story and hit that subscribe button and join me again next week.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Ciao.